Last week, we heard from the amazing Pamela King, who shared so many great ideas and tips about staying on top of your work, keeping things as streamlined as possible, and managing your time, managing all the parts of entrepreneurship that can feel really overwhelming at times. So this week, I wanted to follow up on that and share some of my recommended tools that I think any entrepreneur needs to run a business successfully. There are thousands of tools out there, and every day there are new ones coming out, and it can be super overwhelming to figure out what's actually worth investing your time and money into. Because remember, every time you sign up for a new software, a new program, it doesn't magically just work for you. You have to learn it, you have to train it, you have to spend time really figuring out how to use it most effectively. So it's really important, especially as a solopreneur or a small business owner, to invest that time and money wisely. So today I want to just give a rundown of my recommended tools to guide you on this entrepreneurial journey, and hopefully you'll get some ideas from this. All right, let's dive in. Hey there, beautiful human. Welcome to the Bold Women in Business podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Honeyman, a content marketing, branding, and web design expert and founder of Honey Be Bold. This show is all about helping you build the most successful and fulfilling business possible so you can make a bigger impact in the world. Let's dive in. Okay, so this episode might be a little different than many podcast episodes or blog posts or whatever that you might have seen on similar topics, because most of those that I've seen, at least, will give you just tons of tools that you need to be signing up for. Something that you should know about me is I hate paying for subscriptions. It's the thing that I hate most about entrepreneurship. I think I mentioned that in last week's episode with Pamela. So I tend to keep things as simple as possible and as streamlined as possible. And wherever I can find a free option or a cheaper option, I'm going to do that, because I just don't want to be spending a ton of my hard-earned money on subscriptions to keep my business going when it's not necessary. So the number one thing that I pay for, that I use every single day, that I can't live without, is Google Drive. I do everything in the cloud. I can't stand Microsoft products. I hope no one from Microsoft is listening to this podcast and gets me banned from the internet or whatever. But I love the cloud and I love the Google Suite. There are probably other options that are just as good or better. I know a lot of people love Notion, which will come up at different points because Notion does a lot. And probably at some point I might consider moving everything over to Notion. I actually listened to a podcast episode. I can't remember which podcast it was, where someone was saying that they switched everything over to Notion, like all of their document management, everything. But the most important thing is that you need a document management system that is going to work for you. And you need something that has the capability to organize your files, to draft documents, to create spreadsheets, to create whatever it is that you need to run your business. So whatever that is, it doesn't actually matter. The reason I like Google Drive is basically I'm paying for Google Business Suite anyway, because that's what I use for my email. So I didn't want to pay for another subscription. So I stuck with Google Drive. Similarly, for meetings, I use Google Meet, not because I necessarily love Google Meet. It has its problems. It can be buggy at times. Zoom is a lot better in a lot of ways. There are other platforms that might be better, but I just didn't want to pay for another subscription, so I use Google Meet. I'm paying for it anyway. When you're paying for a Google Business Suite, it includes Google Meet, it includes Google Drive, and all the other pieces of the Google Suite. So that's basically that. And that's the theme that you'll see come up over and over again. My motto is, I don't want to pay for another subscription, so I'm going to use what I have. The next kind of category of tools that I think are super important, especially if you're starting out and you're unsure what you should be investing in, you do need some sort of client onboarding system. And unfortunately, I have not found a single tool that can do all of the things that are necessary for that, but I have found a way to streamline things. So before we even talk about onboarding, we need a way to communicate with potential clients and a way to manage our calendars. And so a calendar management tool, a calendar booking tool is super, super, super important. I've tried many tools at this point. I don't even know how many, but I've switched calendar management tools many times and I keep coming back to Calendly. I find it to be the easiest to use. I love their interface. I find it just really clean. It integrates beautifully with all of my different calendars. And they do have a free option. That didn't work for me because I have multiple calendars that I need it to be checking against. So I do have a paid version, but I'm paying for the lowest tier that I could pay for and do what I need to do. And that's always my advice, is to pay for the lowest tier that you can. But there are many calendar management tools out there. You don't have to go with Calendly, but I think it works really well. And as someone who has tried many other tools, I will say I really just keep coming back to Calendly for a reason. And once you have this calendar management tool set up, you can use it for many different types of meetings, right? You're doing networking calls, you're doing sales calls, you're having onboarding calls with your clients, you're having check-in calls with your clients. There are so many different types of calls that you may set up. I even use it to set up paid coaching sessions that people can book with me if they want to book an hour of my time. I have probably more types of calendar events than you might think, but it's really a lot and I can customize them as needed. Once someone says, okay, I want to become your client, you need a way to send them a contract and keep track of those contracts. We are not doing paper contracts anymore. We're not doing just agreeing by email. You are a legitimate entrepreneur and you need to have contracts for your work. So there are a lot of tools out there to generate a contract. I recommend working with a lawyer to draft a standard contract for your services, but there are many ways to do this in relatively cheap ways. DocuSign is the most popular for a reason, because it works really well. It's very clean. It's a great option. And I used it for a long time. You can also use client management systems like Dubsado or Honeybook that also allow you to do invoicing along with contracts. But surprise, surprise, I don't use any of that because, again, I didn't want to pay for another subscription. So I found a platform that has a free version that worked for my needs. It's called Xodo, XODO. I don't get anything for recommending this platform. I just like it because it's free and I was able to cut a subscription out of my monthly bills. And you need an invoicing tool. So an invoicing tool, I personally use what I use within my accounting software. You definitely need accounting software, especially if you're bringing in enough money. I think that at any level, you really need some sort of accounting software, and there are more expensive and less expensive options. I'll tell you the three that I've tried and where I've landed and what I'm happiest with. So when I first started my business, I was on FreshBooks, which is a really affordable option, and it's really good for people who are just starting out. It has a lot of limitations though, and so it didn't take me long to exceed those limitations. And then I moved over to QuickBooks, which is the most popular accounting software. If you do a poll of, what accounting software are people using, most likely most entrepreneurs are using QuickBooks. And certainly larger companies are on QuickBooks. And there's a reason. It's really good. For the most part, it's really good. Here's why I switched away from QuickBooks. I found that, first of all, the subscription was a lot of money, just more than I wanted to be paying. And the more things that I needed, the more the subscription went up. And the jumps are actually quite large. To go from one level of service to the next is quite significant. So it got to the point where I was paying a nice chunk of change for my subscription and I was getting really annoyed. And on top of that, my operations manager, who's amazing and does my books, was spending an inordinate amount of time reconciling my books because QuickBooks really does not make the reconciling easy and it it just takes a lot of time to manage QuickBooks. So I turned to good old LinkedIn and asked for recommendations, and a lot of people recommended Wave, which is what I wound up switching to. It is a fraction of the cost of QuickBooks, and I find that it works beautifully for my needs. It has really nice invoicing. The account reconciliation is great. It does everything that I need it to do. The only complaint I have about it is when someone pays through ACH, sometimes that money will take quite a while to land in my bank account, especially if it's a larger payment. You know, if it's a payment that's $5,000 or more, I've found that can take up to like 10 business days to wind up in my bank account. So to me, that is a worthwhile con for all the pros, but that's basically why I really like Wave. Okay, so we've covered document management, we've covered calendar management, we've covered contracts, invoicing, and accounting software. Now let's talk about project management. So project management is an interesting one because it's so individual and everyone has their own way of working, their own needs when it comes to project management. I have tried a lot of project management tools because I struggle a lot with project management. It's just a tough challenge for me, staying on top of everything and the ways that project management tools tend to lay out information. I have a hard time processing in that way, and everyone learns in their own way and processes in their own way and has different ways of managing their projects. For the most part, my team uses ClickUp, which again has a free version and is great. And even the paid versions are really affordable. I personally don't love spending time in ClickUp. It doesn't do me any good. So my team really likes it. I don't love it. And personally, I will be so honest with you, so for real, as the kids say, the ways that I manage my projects personally now, my tasks, I have a big whiteboard next to my desk and I just basically write out my tasks. This has been working really well for me lately. I just went super old school with my task list. And that actually relates in a big way to the conversation with Pamela last week, because she was also a big fan of the pen and paper, just really old school style of managing tasks. I have an incredible operations manager on my team, so she really keeps me on task as well. And she's in ClickUp all day, every day, and she's staying on top of any milestones for projects and things like that. Although I will say, because I work in an intensive model with my projects, where my projects are very concentrated amounts of time, there aren't usually a million moving pieces that have to be on a timeline and things like that. It's usually, I have my list of tasks that have to get done for the day or for the week at most. And so it doesn't work in the way that a project management tool is needed. That's me personally, but some other tools that you might consider are, I know people like Asana and Notion. Again, Notion is one that I'm pretty sure at some point I will switch to Notion for things, but switching over to a new tool is a whole to do. People like Airtable, Monday.com, I have some experience with. I've really worked with a lot. At one point, I was using a tool called Moxie, which I did not personally love, but I know that a lot of people do. And it has a lot of different features to it that people really love. So it's possible that they've actually improved things since I had used it about a year ago, but it didn't work for me personally. Again, just because of the way that I think, it just didn't work for me personally, but it might be something that you would consider. The most important thing, though, when you think about project management is you have to think again about how you work and what you need to stay on top of your tasks. If you don't need a project management tool and you're fine staying on top of your tasks using a notepad on your desk or a note on your computer or a whiteboard behind you, whatever you need, you don't need to get fancy with it. But if you're having a hard time staying on top of things, it is a good idea to explore a project management tool that you can use to really break your tasks down into smaller bite-sized pieces and keep yourself accountable on a schedule. And you could even create a Google Sheet that has some automations in there. It does not have to be fancy. You just need a place where you have your tasks that you need to get done out of your head and on paper or on a screen or wherever. You just need them organized somewhere. Okay, let's talk about content creation. So the number one thing that I use every day, I don't even know how many times a day, is Google Drive. I'm just constantly creating content in Google Docs, in Google Sheets, in Google Slides. I'm using Google Drive constantly. I use Canva all the time. No shade to Canva. Canva's not great for creating like complex graphics. That's why I have a graphic designer. But for creating content for social media or for other flyers or whatever it is that you need, it's perfect. It's great. And I highly recommend it. And I think it's worth the subscription. If you have a podcast or something along those lines, Descript or Riverside are good options. So actually, I have been using Riverside for a really long time and I like it overall. But I kept hearing about Descript, and as it happens, I am recording this podcast episode on Descript. This is the first time I'm recording an episode in Descript, and so I'm testing it out. I'm seeing if I like it. So far, I do. There are some things that I find a little bit tough to navigate on the back end, but I think it's more precise with the transcription and editing piece of things. So I'm hopeful that I'm actually going to be switching over to Descript soon, but Riverside is great too for a lot of things. And of course, if you are not creating a podcast or a YouTube show or something along those lines, there's no need to invest in a tool like this. If you are running a content marketing machine of some sort, which you should be, as I've talked about ad nauseum, you need some way of keeping yourself visible to your dream clients, and putting content out there on the things that you want people to know you for is the best way to do that. So the best way to stay consistent with that is to batch create your content, which again, I've talked about a lot, and then to use a scheduling tool to keep yourself on task and make sure that you're not just scrambling at the last minute constantly. I actually do a lot of my scheduling natively in the apps on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. I do a lot of my scheduling on there, but there are so many great social media scheduling tools as well. The two that I keep hearing about the most are Metricool and Leader, and I know that people really love them. So I think that those are worth checking out. But if you're like me and you don't want to invest in another subscription, you can also just schedule your posts natively in the apps that you're posting content on. The final category is, how are you going to communicate with your clients? Good old email works great, but it's not necessarily the best way to continue having collaboration with clients when there is an ongoing project, let's say. So I often use Slack for that. I use Slack with my team and occasionally with specific projects. Like I mentioned, most of my projects are more concentrated and this wouldn't necessarily be relevant, but here and there I have longer term projects that Slack is great for. So I'll add a client to Slack so that I can communicate with them, collaborate with them really easily in one place. People really love Voxer. I haven't played around with it myself yet, but I really should because I love voice noting. So I know that it's just a really good way to send a quick note to clients and just a really good option for collaboration with clients. And then there's Loom. So people love Loom. I love Loom. I don't love Loom's price tag. So are you sensing a theme? I don't know. I'm like giving this side of myself away here. So of course, I've come up with a cheap version of Loom. So there are basically two options. One is if you have a Slack account, even if you don't have a paid Slack account, this is my favorite way to do this. When I want to send feedback to a client or a quick video and I want to share my screen, similarly to how you do in Loom, I will go into Slack, I'll open a private message to myself. You have that option. You'll see your name under DMs and you have the option to record a video and you can share your screen while you're recording that video. It limits you to 5 minutes, which I actually really like because first of all, no one wants to watch a video that's, 30 minutes long. So it keeps me really focused. It keeps the video short, sweet, and to the point. And it allows me to do this and I don't have to pay money for it, which is great. And then I can just save that video to my computer. I upload it to Google Drive, good old Google Drive, and I'll just send the link to a client. That's option one. Option two, which is also a great option, is to actually have a Google Meet with yourself. No one else is in this Google Meet, and you can share your screen like you're in a Google Meet with someone else. If you're recording the call, you will be able to share your screen, record it, all of that. It'll send you the file. One caveat is I don't think you're able to record Google Meet meetings unless you have a paid subscription at a certain level. So I needed that for my Google Business Suite anyway, so that's what I do. But that is another option, is that you can actually record it in Google Meet and then send the link to your client. But what's important here, again, is that you have clear, easy ways to communicate with your clients, to collaborate with your clients, and that it's not just all happening over email. Again, email is great and can be a great way to stay in touch with your clients. It also depends on what you prefer. If you are fine with communicating with your clients via email, or if you prefer doing that because it puts some boundaries on the relationship, whatever you feel most comfortable with is important. It's just important to think about, how do you want to communicate with your clients? How do you want to collaborate with them? So to recap, we've got document management, client onboarding, project management, ways to communicate with your clients, and the essential tools you need for content creation. These are the most important things that you need. And accounting software. Most likely you don't need more than this. If you're running a larger operation, you have more things involved and more complex needs, obviously there might be a need for some additional tools. But for the most part, people get way too fancy with the tools. They spend more money than they need to on tools. And one pro tip from my coach, Peter Giordano III, is that before you sign up for an annual subscription, and I'm guilty of this because I will always go for an annual subscription if there's an option versus going for the monthly, because I don't like the payments coming out of my bank account each month or on my credit card each month. I'd rather just pay that lump sum, know what I'm paying, and not lose sight of my subscriptions, and usually get a discount that way. But Peter makes a really good point, and I've started doing this, is before you sign up for a full year, sign up for 1 month and just test it out and see how you like it. Make sure that it's something that you're actually going to use. And if you wind up using it for like 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, and then you realize that you're not really using it, you can cancel it. And then you haven't paid for a whole year and you save money that way. It really is that simple. So I hope this was helpful. If you have any tools that you love that I should know about, or if you relate to my, phobia of project management tools, reach out, send me a message. I'd love to hear. And if you have any other tools that my audience should be aware of, just let me know. I'd love to share that maybe in a future episode, or on LinkedIn, I'll share a post. And thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. All right, beautiful human. That's it for today's show. This show is brought to you by my company, Honey Be Bold, with music by Shmookalele. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe on your podcast listening platform of choice. And if you can take 5 seconds to rate and review us, it really helps the show grow. And before you go, if you're struggling to attract and convert your dream clients, be sure to check out my free mini course, 3 Days to Bold Messaging That Converts, and you'll get personalized feedback from me on how to nail your messaging every time. Head on over to honeybebold.com/free. That's honeybebold.com/FREE to sign up. Thanks for listening.